Hey guys, Pat here. I'm here to review Avengers Endgame, the final chapter in at least this saga, this part of the MCU, with the original Avengers cast, which would be Robert Downey Jr., Chris Hemsworth, Chris Evans, Scarlett Johansson, Jeremy Renner, Samuel Jackson, and so on. Last year I did the spoiler review for Infinity War. The difference with that is I did that right when I came out of the theater on a Friday, and then reviewed the film like right after I got out. I saw this film on Friday, and today's Monday. That's because I had to work a lot over the weekend. On Saturday I worked 14 hours, and then on Sunday I worked like 9 hours. And I had to get home to watch Game of Thrones. I've been working on an American Werewolf in London video for like 2 weeks, and that's why there hasn't been a video uploaded in 2 weeks, which I apologize for. I also know there hasn't been a Box Office Addict in 2 weeks, but I plan on doing that Box Office Addict tomorrow, which will become we covering the record-breaking opening for this movie, which you haven't read. Opened to 350 million domestic and 1.2 billion worldwide, unprecedented. Lots to say about that. So you're going to get a 1-2 punch. Today is the movie review, and tomorrow is the box office breakdown. If you don't want spoilers, this is going to be one of those live stream spoiler reviews I do where I go through the whole movie. I haven't done one of these in a while. I don't think I'll do a formal review of this movie with editing and all that. That's just a nice, concise little opinion piece. Also, I don't think this is an interesting movie to talk about if you don't spoil it. Infinity War, I think I could have reviewed that film without a spoiler review. This film, on the other hand, every review I watched where they didn't spoil the movie was just fucking boring and generic and the same shit. Like everybody, I mean, watch the Collider reviews. They're just like, yeah, I loved it. It's a 4.4 out of 5. I love this, but I can't talk about it. Spoilers. I can't. It's like, well, then don't even fucking review it, man. It's fucking annoying after a point. It's like, if you're not going to talk about the movie, why are you making a video just to tell people you loved it? So this movie's all critically acclaimed. It has 96% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's the second best reviewed MCU film, really, behind Black Panther. It has 77 on Metacritic. Some are calling it the best superhero film of all time. Some are comparing it to Return of the King. Most people I talked to said they've cried 6 times during the movie, or that it was amazing. But there has been a lot of negative reception as well. If you check some forums and certain reviews that are breaking down things, and even Red Letter Media, Your Movie Sucks, and some other critics have pointed out negative things about the film. If you listen to my Infinity War review, I liked it a lot. Infinity War was a total surprise to me as just a kinetic action film. It was sort of nonstop, and how funny it was. That there was just this barrage of jokes and action and camaraderie and stuff happening pretty much the whole 2.5 hours. And then it was really about Thanos, and even the beginning of the film, the scene where Thanos beats up Hulk and Thor was just so impactful, and the movie sort of has this tone and energy to it that I loved. I thought it was a real accomplishment. I thought it was more of a reflection of the things they established, the Russos, as filmmakers in Winter Soldier, more so than Civil War did for me in some ways. But then also it had this James Gunn quality to it with the Guardians of the Galaxy stuff. But now that this movie's out, I think with this movie they were going for a bit more of a Joss Whedon sort of tone and feel. I think they were going a little bit more for stuff that was going on in Age of Ultron and the original Avengers. And I think this is the most fan-service-y movie maybe ever made. This whole film is just a bunch of fan service. And it's weird this came out the same weekend as Game of Thrones Battle of Winterfell, because I pretty much have the same feeling about both of them, where I enjoyed the episode of Game of Thrones after all this hype, and I enjoyed this movie. But when I think about both of them and certain parts and decisions that were made, it's extremely aggravating. And I have major issues, and it almost kills the build-up over years for me, where I'm very disappointed. After Infinity War was so awesome, I don't know what I expected this movie to be, and maybe that was me being unfair to it being its different thing. And with Winterfell, it was some intense moments, but it's just like, wow, no main character died. And Arya, what she did, that kind of pisses me off. And so many cool things feel like they're just wrapped up in too neatly. I I guess we'll just go through it. I'll put it this way. I don't like this movie as much as Infinity War. Really at all. Yeah, that part sucked. I don't like this movie as much as probably Winter Soldier and the original Iron Man. And I don't know if I like it as much as Guardians of the Galaxy. So I'm not saying this is low-tier Marvel, because it's not. This is not Thor the Dark World. This isn't Iron Man 2 or any of that. I will say this is mid-tier Marvel. I don't think this is that much better of a movie than, let's say, Ant-Man. As a movie, yeah, this is two separate things. Is this just a movie, or do I have to review it as a finale to everyone's storylines? And the episodic nature of the film makes it odd. This is a bunch of different movies. This isn't, Noel, when Peter Parker comes back at the end of this movie and hugs Tony Stark, I was thinking about us. Made me really emotional. But let's just go through. Yeah, Last Jedi popped up in my head during the Game of Thrones fight, and it kind of popped up in my head during this movie, which I know is going to upset a lot of people, because a lot of people love this movie, and people on Twitter are talking about it being great. So I don't want to ruin people's fun, because this is the biggest movie ever, and I was certainly excited for it. And for the most part, I think it's a solid movie. Like, I don't dislike this film. It's basically Back to the Future 2. With superheroes, or Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. But I'll just put it this way. I don't get what they were totally going for with this movie. I think there's a tone issue from the very beginning. The somber tone. And I think the film feels very uneven and awkward. And this was a very weird movie to watch. So, okay, let's just start off. So, I like the beginning of the movie well enough. Hawkeye's family disappearing. I like the way they do it very subtly with the camera just moving and they're gone. And then we jump to Tony Stark with Nebula in a ship, the ship from the end of Infinity War, after Thanos snaps his fingers and kills half the population of the universe. So, this stuff I like. I think Robert Downey Jr. is great in this movie. I think he gives a great performance. I think this is one of his best performances in the Marvel films. I especially think in the first 20 minutes. Basically, he's floating out in space and he's about to die until Captain Marvel conveniently shows up to save them. It takes them down to Earth, where the other Avengers are nursing their wounds from defeat. And there's a great moment where Robert Downey Jr. comes out of the ship and goes to Captain America and says, "I lost the kid." And he says, "I lost too, Tony." And then there's a really great scene where Iron Man, who's lost a bunch of weight and looks real thin, just goes off on all of the Avengers that are remaining in the room about how he was warning them about this. This is the best acted scene in the movie, in my opinion. And I love the tone of the scene, and it was making me very excited for the movie. It's going to be this kind of film. All right, this feels more adult and mature than what I was expecting, and it's more grounded than Infinity War was, which was just like pop excitement. Unleashed in front of my eyeballs. So they all get together. Captain Marvel shows up and they said, "Let's go get Thanos. Let's go get the son of a bitch." Back to school. Funny at Weird Science. So they go find Thanos, just chilling out on a farm in a Terrence Malick movie, making some shit like Rey did in Force Awakens, and then the Avengers show up and fuck him up. And Thor cuts his head off. This is one of my first issues with the movie. I get that they were trying to subvert your expectations, and it is surprising they deal with Thanos so quickly. And it's not that it's even not clever, but Thanos was so interesting in Infinity War. A lot of the tension here was them going back to that Thanos, the one that has a history with them, and then they kill him off and we get a 5-year time jump. Now, this isn't necessarily a flaw with that part of the movie, but the fact that Thanos comes back into the movie later and it's a past version of Thanos, I think took so much tension out of this movie. With Infinity War, there was so much tension of not knowing what was going to happen or who was going to die and how it wrapped up, and this film was very predictable. After that point, it kind of went exactly where I thought it was going to go. And to its credit, and also to its detriment, I think, is that the movie does a lot of things that fans wanted and that they've built up, but it also doesn't surprise you in ways that you weren't expecting. Which I'd also complain about the battle for Winterfell, the Long Night episode. So the movie then turns into a 5-year time jump. It's apocalyptic, it's somber, all the characters are depressed. Steve Rogers is running these like council sessions for people trying to get over everyone disappearing. And I like this idea. It's like, oh, we're actually going to spend some time with these people. Iron Man has a kid now. Everything's different. There's some weird thing with the movie early on where everyone's eating lunch and it's about food. Like the beginning scenes, like Hawkeye, like, what do you want on your hot dog? Mayonnaise. Okay. Oh, what about mustard? Oh, mustard. And then later it's like Iron Man's having lunch and then Black Widow's eating a peanut butter sandwich. And then at the end of the movie, Jon Favreau's like, what do you want? You want cheeseburgers? Your dad liked cheeseburgers. I'm like, what the fuck is with food in this movie? We're just eating. Anyway, the characters don't know what to do. They're all depressed and emo and shit. And then Ant-Man comes back out of the quantum realm, which this is one of my favorite stretches of the movie, Ant-Man coming out and finding out that everyone's disappeared. And he sings his name on a memorial. And then he goes to find Captain America. I like all of that stuff. Him waking up and all of that stuff is really great. Really? I heard that Rian Johnson is trolling people on Twitter over because they don't like that. If that's true, Jesus Christ. So in this, so basically what happens is they're like, we have to build a time machine, go into the quantum realm. Iron Man says no. So then then the Hulk tries and they fail, and there's kind of a funny scene. I gotta say though, with the comedy in this movie, big step down from Infinity War. I don't know if it's because James Gunn didn't work on some of the stuff. I thought the jokes kind of fell flat for half the movie. I really didn't think this was like a laugh out loud funny movie. I giggled a few times, but I felt like a lot of the lines needed another rewrite and some more punch up, like Captain America talking about his ass being America's ass. I was like, that's not as funny as like, hey dude, you're embarrassing me in front of the wizards, or when he calls him Squidward, or there's that great part in Infinity War where Chris Pratt's like, who do I serve? What am I supposed to say? Jesus? You know, stuff like that's just so funny. Just a lot of great lines. Doctor Strange and Iron Man's relationship, Rocket and Groot and Thor together. I am Groot, I am Steve Rogers. All of this stuff on Earth was compelling. I mean, Infinity War, I just enjoyed how they split things up and what was going on. In this film, it's a mixed bag of things once they decide to go into the quantum realm and time travel, because this sets up the Back to the Future 2 thing. They're going to go to past Marvel movies, but the problem with that is that you don't want to see everything they're going back to. For instance, Iron Man, Ant-Man, the Hulk, and Captain America go back to the first Avengers, and this is my favorite one in them going back, because you get to see the Avengers, the final fight and everything from different angles, and it's pretty impressive how they pull this off. Like, you see after they defeat Loki what happens, and the characters look the same. That was my favorite part, was seeing these new angles and perspectives on things that we hadn't seen before. And that was probably my favorite time travel sequence, was everything with the first Avengers, and Captain America fighting himself, the elevator scene where he says Hell Hydra instead of having to fight the guys, Hulk going to meet the Ancient One, all of that stuff I liked. I thought that was a lot of fun. Did not like as much Fat Thor and Rocket going to Thor the Dark World, which is one of the worst movies, and there's just this random Natalie Portman cameo and they really don't have a lot of conflict. It was just so Thor could say bye to his mom. So that's a joke that comes into the movie at the 5-year jump, is that Thor's fat now. And one of the better jokes is when he gets on a headset and tells the troll he's going to come kick his ass. But yeah, Thor's been drinking. Although I don't really know if Thor can get fat from drinking. I always took it as Thor can drink and eat as much as he wants without gaining weight, because he's a god and he always drank an excessive amount of alcohol. But maybe, I don't know, maybe he has to do some kind of cardio. He has to do high intensity god cardio. I don't know. I just always thought his body burned fat and stuff like that. Anyway, Thor's fat. He's a fat ass now. They make Lebowski jokes. So they time travel, and then they go to 2014 with Black Widow and Hawkeye to get the Soul Stone, and then War Machine and Nebula go to the first Guardians of the Galaxy to get the Power Stone, or is it the Mind Stone? I think it's the Power Stone. And that scene's good too, because you get to see a different angle on Chris Pratt singing at the beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy. Once again, that stuff, I wish there had been more of that, actually. I think that really could have been the clever twist of the movie, was seeing these things from a different... 5 years of excess has to do something, and he's not a fucking balloon, so it's somewhat consistent. Does it have to do something? I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm not saying it's a flaw. I don't know. I didn't think Thor could get fat like that. Like, in the same way Captain America, like, I don't know. I guess I'm just going off of my own version of what I think superhero logic is. Or like Dragon Ball Z logic or something, that these people can eat and drink as much as they want, and nothing really happens to their bodies. But I suppose Thor, if he drinks enough, can get a beer belly. But, you know, it was okay. It wasn't a bad joke. I do think the joke got thin as the movie went on, and I kind of just wanted the Thor that I was liking from Infinity War and even from Thor Ragnarok. So, anyway, there's Smart Hulk now, which he just decided to be Mark Ruffalo Hulk. This is actually one of the better ideas in the movie. Smart Hulk's kind of great in the flick. There's even a part where they go back to the first Avengers. They're like, hey, pretend to smash stuff, and he's just kind of only half smashing. That's one of the better jokes in the movie. So I really had no issue with Smart Hulk. I thought that was great. I think Mark Ruffalo was great in the movie, and I think he had a lot of the best parts in the movie tonally, and how he came into the movie. And this was clearly because Kevin Feige loves Back to the Future, and they reference Back to the Future. They were going for like a Robert Zemeckis like toned feel to this movie. This is a totally different movie from Infinity War. I especially felt like the second act, they were very much thinking like classic 80s Zemeckis type. And that's when it becomes a fun romp. It becomes a fun, goofy, silly movie. They go back to the 70s, and Iron Man meets his father. It's a cool little period piece. Feels a little Star Trek-y. All that's fun. And anything with Iron Man and Captain America, for the most part, during the time travel stuff is really good. Wasn't so much into the stuff with Hawkeye and Black Widow, even though I like those characters. There's kind of a cool action scene at the beginning with Hawkeye where the camera follows him, although not a lot of action in this movie for 2 hours. There's really not a major fight scene for the most part till the ending of the movie. Where when you think about Infinity War, it's kind of non-stop how many set pieces there are. It kind of just starts. I do have pacing issues with this. I think the first hour being so somber and kind of going... I hated it too funny. I gotta say, I was talking about it. I was talking about how this movie and that coming out in the same weekend gave me the same feelings of disappointment in the writing. So, especially if that's the Night King's final scene, that's just terrible. If he doesn't come back, D&D just like, what the fuck? Really? Fucking really? After 8 years? So, yeah, all that stuff was fun. I guess I just, I felt like the first hour being so slow and like grounded, it just was weird that it turned into a different movie with the time travel movie. And then in the third act, it becomes apocalyptic and goes back to the Infinity War grandeur. But by that point, you're kind of exhausted after 2 hours of like so much movie where a lot's going on. And there's so many different tones and things. And that when you actually get to that third act final battle, even though that's the best part of the movie is the final battle and all of the characters coming back and the trinity of Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor fighting Thanos from the past, that's all the highlight of the movie. But I will say that I do think this movie could have been shorter. It's not that I have a problem with the 3-hour movie. I just don't think... I think it could have been a tighter movie. I think this movie could have been 2 hours and like 20 something minutes or even 2 hours and 30. I think you could have cut 25-30 minutes out of this movie. It just made it like move quicker, that when Ant-Man comes back the plot really starts to move and then we get going and we don't waste time. I didn't think they were wheel spinning so much. It was just that it took a while for the movie to really turn into what it was. And then once it actually became like this, you know, it's a race against time, and then Thanos finds out and he's trying to change things, and they're basically in a race for the new Infinity Gauntlet. I was fine with all that. I just think that's like a 2-hour movie in itself, and that first hour kind of being this weird epilogue to Infinity War is the weird like intermission between the two movies. It's almost like you look at Infinity War and then this film's kind of like the time travel and the final act, and that whole little piece in between there where they kill Thanos and what happens all feels like it's just like the epilogue. Yeah, I do think it could have been shorter. I think it could have been the same like this. I don't think it needed to be 3 hours. I thought it did need to be when I went to go see it. It wasn't like it felt like 3 hours. This movie had great pacing. It did feel like 100 minutes, but it's just as a film structurally, I think it could have been tighter. I think that it could have had an immediacy to it to kind of get to the point, and keep up the energy. Even with the 5-year time jump, we should kind of jump to 5 years and then be like, let's fucking go. But the movie spends these scenes trying to spend time with these characters, and it just doesn't. It's just not. It's like they kept too much footage when they were editing this movie, so it makes the cutting and all that not as tight as it's been before. But I had that same problem with Civil War. Oddly enough, I didn't have that problem with Infinity War, which I thought I was going to have. I think Infinity War has really good pacing and kind of is necessary in its length. But this film, on the other hand, I don't really think the 3-hour epic served it as an action movie, as an escapist film. I think that kind of it hurt the movie overall, because, you want to be excited the whole movie. But when you really get to the middle part and you spend those scenes with Thor and Rocket, I think you really feel it. And you're like, okay, Thor and Rocket could have just gotten this stone and gotten out of there in 5 minutes. And all of the stuff they do that drags it out from them getting it there really isn't that interesting. As is, it's not that interesting to watch, like, War Machine and Nebula together for a little while. All that stuff just isn't that fun, It's definitely not as fun as the Guardians meeting Iron Man and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. Nothing's as fun as that. It's not as fun as Thor meeting the Guardians. It's not as fun as Captain America going to Wakanda and joining the army. I just have those issues with it. It was tonally a very weird film. It was sort of all over the place. It's like the Russos made like 3 or 4 different movies. So it's hard to look at this as its own movie in a lot of ways. It's just a mesh of tones of other Marvel movies. So then they get the Infinity Stones for the most part, and then we get to the third act, where Nebula is now the Nebula from the past, pretending to be Nebula from the future, and she brings Thanos and his army and everybody to the future. They blow up the Avengers compound. Now, the Avengers compound gets shot up with like 100,000 fucking missiles, and all of it gets smashed. It's kind of like that scene in Iron Man 3, and nobody dies. Nobody even gets hurt. Hawkeye kind of gets a little hurt. That's about it. Ant-Man gets blown the fuck up, and he's okay. I didn't get that. It felt like this was supposed to be the moment in the movie where things get really serious, but everyone sort of lived. Once again, Game of Thrones last night. I see Brienne being swarmed by 50 zombies. How the fuck does she live? But she does. I see Sam Tarly covered in bodies. He lives. I see Jaime Lannister being swarmed by zombies. He lives. All these characters are just being attacked by thousands of zombies, and they just somehow get out of it. And it's like, how? Why can't you just kill people? Like, you can't even fucking kill Bran. And like here, it's like, you couldn't kill Rhodes. You couldn't kill Hawkeye in this scene. You couldn't kill, I don't know, anyone. Just anyone that was in the rubble could have died. Or got hurt, given them an injury. If Iron Man like hurt his leg, and his leg was kind of fucked up during it, or Captain America got hurt or something. I think that would have, like how the Hulk, like his arm gets hurt because he uses the Infinity Gauntlet to snap everyone back. But then that really doesn't factor into the third act with his arm being messed up. So for me, the stakes were kind of not there. When the explosion happened and then Thanos shows back up, I didn't feel the tension I think they were going for, because it was sort of like, well, outside of Nebula deceiving them, which they kill her off quick, that should have been the third act, is them not knowing Nebula what she was doing and her fucking them over. But Gamora and Nebula just kill her, and then they have the Infinity Gauntlet, the new Infinity Gauntlet, the Stark Gauntlet. So my issue there is just like there's not a lot of tension going on at this point, which it feels fan servicey. Which kind of bothered me, It's like, I didn't think we were doing that. I thought this was like the no fucking around time for Marvel. So maybe someone can explain this to me, because I actually think this film is filled with plot holes. I think they break their own time travel rules. I think the time travel makes no sense. I'm willing to give that a pass with the Time House. Yeah, I agree with you. If the Time Heist was the movie, if like really the first act was them like setting it up like Mission Impossible, and then the whole second half was the time heist, like the first hours the movie being set up, and then the next 90 minutes is the time heist, and they keep jumping through different Marvel scenes and getting the stones, and like they have to refight Loki who escapes, they have to fight previous villains, and maybe they do fight 2014 Thanos, but they fight him back in that era of Guardians of the Galaxy, and they run into the Guardians again, and all that stuff happens, and then the final act is them barely escaping with the Infinity Stones and then bringing everybody back. I think that would have been a better movie. I think if it had just been the time heist movie, I keep wanting to say Tower Heist. I think that would have been a better film. It could have been like a 2.5 hour time travel movie. I'll say this right now. Days of Future Past is better than this, in my opinion. And that movie's 2 hours and 10 minutes and is a tighter film. It's better paced. The emotional scenes with Xavier and Magneto work better. It doesn't have a lot of action either. It really just has the Quicksilver scene and a few other beats. But then when you get to that third act where Magneto lifts the stadium and it's psychological, I think that was just better overall with this sort of thing with the time travel. I think this is much weaker in comparison to that movie. Infinity War I thought was great, but I don't think this was as good as Days of Future Past. I thought it was a much better time travel movie because basically once Wolverine went back in time, that was the movie, and they didn't really betray that. Where this film tries to have its cake and eat it too, where it tries to be a follow-up to Infinity War, a natural conclusion, a time travel story, and then the big epic battle with Thanos that you wanted to see before, but with all of the characters now. And then as a goodbye to characters that have been set up, and then setting up legacy characters. See, with the problem with this movie is what the Russo should have done is constructed it to this movie is what should make it fascinating and get you a sense of awe. Should be the sequences that set up what could be the future of the MCU. Like, oh, what are the characters going to do now in this new universe where they've been gone for 5 years? Who's going to take over? What's Wakanda going to be like now? What's Asgard going to be like now? That should be what's going through your head the whole movie, is the future of the MCU. But instead, this film is so set on nostalgia and making you think about the past and as a celebration of everything that's come before. It's not exciting in that way where it's moving pieces together to set up the next decade to make you excited to see these characters who are going to follow up after the original lineups kind of passing the torch here. And I don't think that was what they were going for with this movie. So I think the flaw there is then this movie has to be looked at as a sequel to Infinity War, and I think it's a lesser follow-up, and as a culmination of everything that's come before, it works, but it's kind of just a fun romp. Like, it's a fun 3-hour goofy superhero movie. It's very fluffy, instead of being, this epic that I think a lot of people are calling it. This like epic amazing movie. I don't think it's an epic amazing movie. I think it's a sum of its parts movie, and I think it did feel very TV. And I do think that the comedy, I don't think this has the funniest jokes in a Marvel movie. I don't think this has the best action scenes in a Marvel movie. And I don't think this has the best plot in a Marvel movie. But having said all that, I gotta say, having said all that, though, there's a lot of good stuff in this movie. It sounds like I'm just shitting on this movie. There is good stuff. Captain America being in this more is great. Chris Evans is great. Robert Downey Jr. is great in this movie. I really don't have any issue with Robert Downey Jr.'s performance or anything like that. Ant-Man's great in this movie. He has a really fun storyline going on. Him seeing his daughter after 5 years is a really emotional scene. I like Smart Hulk. I like Nebula for the first time. It's cool seeing Gamora from a different time and how she doesn't know Peter Quill. I like Spider-Man reuniting with Tony. I like all of that stuff. It's just, it almost is like they wrote themselves in a corner. Like, to give themselves that conclusion that was so interesting at the end of Infinity War, they had to make a movie like this to fix any kind of issues, because what do you do after they lose? They couldn't make that permanent. But I don't know. I don't know if this is actually that good of a movie. It's emotional and has a sense of finality to it because of what we've watched before. So if anything, I think this film's going to be an argument negative or positive, whether the Marvel formula and what they did, Kevin Feige did, ultimately paid off here. People are going to use this film as the example of, well, look, it did work, and it did financially. But if we're talking about it as a film, like if it was really worth it all of these years, I think that's debatable. Like the Game of Thrones thing, you know? I waited 10 years for this, and I don't know if this totally met the hype after 10 years, which maybe it never was going to, but I think there was miscalculations here. I think almost filming it right after Infinity War, I don't think they gave themselves enough time to really flesh out everything with this movie, and I think maybe there was almost something, like they were almost a little tired and weren't as fresh coming into this movie as they were when they made Infinity War. I think that's why I think the energy's kind of low in this movie because of that. I think they really needed to take a break and kind of ease back into this. Yeah, she really wasn't good in this either. Captain Marvel wasn't good in this movie either. She's visually cool. That's about it. That's all I can really say. I wonder what Mahler's going to think of this. I think everything he praises Infinity War, I think this has huge problems that if he ignores it would blow my mind. I'm curious what a lot of people are going to think about this movie, because I think it's going to be really debated. I think some people are going to love it and some people are going to hate it. And it's years from now we're going to be discussing its merits. And because it was like I was enjoying myself the whole time I was in there, but it did remind me of Age of Ultron, where I was enjoying it. And then, but I was also thinking, like, this is a really fucking messy movie that's kind of convoluted. And it needed a few more passes in the scripting stage. And there's just not a lot of iconic shots and moments like I was expecting either. And it felt more emotionally manipulative than Infinity War did, and a lot of the other films did. Like, this felt like a really, like, you could tell when they were doing the emotional scenes, like with Hawkeye and his family, or the scenes with him and Black Widow. It felt manipulative in a bad way, where you could see the filmmaking and what they were trying to do. These emotional beats don't feel organic like I was expecting them to. Like the big battle at the end of Wakanda has these nice little character moments where, like, Rocket's like, I'm gonna get that arm, or the I am Steve Rogers. There's not little moments like that are as good here. The one-liners and character exchanges aren't as fresh. Even that stuff where Thor's like, I see you've copied my beard. You know, all of that was so fun. And this movie isn't as fun as I was expecting it to be. I thought I was gonna have a fun time, or that this was gonna be a really serious, emotionally devastating film, a very dark movie, and it wasn't really that either. It was fighting itself. It was at odds with itself, from being a darker Marvel film, a more serious Marvel film, a more grounded Marvel film, and then a time travel cosmic space adventure that didn't need to keep an internal logic to kind of keep everything feeling like it made sense. So a lot of the movie ends up not making sense when you think about things in retrospect and how it adds up to other movies. I don't know. I'm glad you guys aren't hating on me for this, because I thought everybody was just going to be like, dude, this movie was fucking great. I loved it. I thought the chat was going to hate me here and be like, dude, what are you talking about? This was a masterpiece and epic. Because, yeah, I'll be honest, I was trepidatious about even doing a review, because I don't want to upset people who are loving this movie and telling me how great it is. I don't want to, like, tell them, like, oh, okay, well, I didn't love it. I thought it was okay. You know, that's the thing, because I'm seeing so many critics praise it, and I'm just sitting here kind of like, I don't I don't know. Anyway, the third act, maybe someone can explain this to me, because I can admit that maybe I don't know, but I had a problem with this. How does Thanos fight Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man, and kick their asses? Like, for instance, at the end of Infinity War, when Thor comes with Stormbreaker, he takes a hit for Yes, I'll get into the annoying moviegoers here. As you remember, my rant that came from the Infinity War review that was turned into a video where I ranted about the guy going, "No, no, no, Spider-Man," and everybody yelling. I was worried at the beginning of this film, because when I was there, people were acting that way. And there's the scene early on where Hawkeye and his kids are getting mayo and mustard. And there was this fucking, like, 20-year-old Asian glasses geek kid who's like a cringe god. Like, you could look at him and just see that, like, oh no, this is one of those geeks that's like an extrovert for all the wrong reasons and tries to say funny things. It's like a lot of those dudes who live stream video games and you hear their commentary over the video game that 12-year-olds watch, and it's the worst shit you've ever heard. It's like the sound of Jim Carrey screaming in the guy's ear in Dumb and Dumber. So when they're doing that, that guy's walking out to take a piss, and he yells out at the end of the scene, "I'll take mayo on mine," thinking that the theater would laugh. We all just turned awkwardly and cringed as he did this. So here was my fear. I already had to deal with the no guy. Now was I going to have to deal with Mayo Kid? The no guy was in the past. I snapped him away. But unfortunately, as Iron Man says, if you fuck with time, it finds a way of fucking with you. So here I was with this inevitable fear of Mayo Kid, that he was going to be making shitty jokes and trying to make the audience laugh the whole time, and just making me very uncomfortable. Fortunately, Mayo Kid got the message immediately when his joke fell flat, and that was very nice. There was still a guy behind me yelling and being kind of like the no guy, but it was, I'll say this was far better than my audience during Infinity War. Everyone was way cooler. Everybody was quiet. They laughed when they thought something was funny. People weren't clapping every scene like they did in Infinity War. Sometimes people yelled out, like when Cap grabbed Mjolnir, but that didn't bother me because it was, people weren't doing it the whole movie. Like Infinity War, the whole movie, people were yelling and stuff like that for 2.5 hours, and it really was annoying. In this movie, people did it every like half hour, and no, Thanos had stones at that point though. Like, Thanos is wearing the Infinity Gauntlet, and doesn't he have the Power Stone at that point? If I'm correct? So when he's fighting Thor, even though he's beating him up, technically he has an Infinity Stone at that point. He has 2, doesn't he? So, he has at least 1. So I don't know if he used it technically, but when he's fighting Thor, he does have it on him. I mean, when he's fighting Hulk. But then that makes Infinity War flawed, because he kicked Hulk's ass, but then Thor comes with Stormbreaker, that when he shoots the Infinity Blast at him, Thor takes the hit and then still gets to Thanos and hits him in the chest. So that makes me assume then that Thor is strong enough to handle a power blast from the Infinity Gauntlet and still hurt Thanos. That Stormbreaker is that strong because it was forged in the same place the Infinity Gauntlet was forged at. So it has powers that are at the level of the Infinity Gauntlet, and what it can hold, Stormbreaker does. So Thor is wielding Stormbreaker at the end of this movie. Now, I get that Thor is out of shape and out of practice, but he still has a weapon that should be able to pretty much break through Thanos' armor and hurt him. So I don't get that. No, doesn't Thanos have a stone in that fight, though? I thought he had the... He doesn't have the... Okay, I thought he had the Power Stone in that. I thought he had 1 stone in the beginning fight. But I guess this first stone he gets is the one from Loki. Yeah, see, now this doesn't make sense. Because if he was able to beat the Thor and Hulk, but then with the Infinity Gauntlet, Hulk was able to get the jump on him. But then in this movie, Scarlet Witch is about to beat him. So is Scarlet Witch stronger than Thor? Is what they're saying? That she's the strongest character? Because she even did better than Captain Marvel. Yeah, Thanos has the Power Stone when he fights Hulk. Yeah, he does have the Power Stone, right? Yeah, so I assume that was why he was so strong, because it's the Power Stone. So he had enough power to beat up the Hulk and Thor. That was my thinking when I watched that scene, was that the Power Stone was giving him that ability. Yeah, but we don't know if he didn't use them in the Thor fight. Like, we're seeing the aftermath of the fight with the Asgardians. my assumption is that he did use... So, yeah, so that's what I don't get. He has no Infinity Stones in this final battle. And here's the thing, I don't mind that he can beat Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man. It just looked too easy. Like, do you remember at the end of Infinity War where Iron Man fights Thanos and he makes him drop blood? He, like, kicks his ass. Like, and he had the Infinity Gauntlet with, what, 4 stones? And Iron Man actually puts up a fight for, like, a minute or two. And then Doctor Strange puts up a fight. He uses the magic and, like, creates the butterflies and creates 100 versions of himself. And Thanos is having to use the Infinity Gauntlet to take these guys on. He has to use the Infinity Gauntlet to fight these characters. They're basically going to win if Star-Lord didn't fuck up. So my problem with that is that if he's using the Infinity Gauntlet to fight them, that means that he probably had to use it, or he was being lazy. Who knows? But then in this film, he, with no Infinity Stones, is able to easily beat up Thor, easily beat up Iron Man, and easily beat up Captain America at the same time. Like, him defeating Thor and then beating up the Hulk, okay. But then how did Iron Man beat him up with the Infinity, when he had the Infinity Stones? How did Iron Man actually get some hits in on him? And especially with Cap wielding Mjolnir. You think if Cap was wielding Mjolnir and Thor had Stormbreaker and Iron Man was using all of the stuff that he had in Infinity War, you think they would at least be able to beat Thanos up a little bit and make him drop some blood, but it's like they don't even put a dent on him. And he just beats the fuck out of Thor. But then Scarlet Witch shows up and easily beats him up. So does that mean if the Vision was around, he would have been able to beat up Thanos as well? I guess the power levels just don't make sense to me. For instance, in the first Avengers, Thor hits Captain America's shield with Mjolnir, and the shield doesn't break. But then Thanos has a blade that's able to break through the shield like it's nothing. Yeah, but he said he was powerful, but should he be powerful enough to take on those Avengers so easily? I get that because even Hulk got some good hits in. I felt like Thanos was a little too OP in the fight with the Trinity. I could be wrong. I'm not acting like this is definitive, but I felt like it should have been a little bit more even. That he shouldn't have so easily been able to break Captain America's shield, so easily been able to beat Thor up, knock Iron Man around. I feel like those 3 characters should have had a better, yeah, especially once all the Avengers show up. Like, shouldn't Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange, and all of them just be able to easily kill Thanos at the same time? When Iron Man fought him at the end of Infinity War, he used all of his tools to stop him using the Gauntlet, which was his only weapon, so he's relying on it to be fair. Yeah, I don't know. I felt like they should have been able to beat Thanos. I don't know. Only because of Stormbreaker. If Thor didn't have Stormbreaker, I could get it more. But I thought it was established that Stormbreaker was strong enough to take on the Infinity Gauntlet. So wouldn't Thor be able to take on Thanos with that weapon? Wouldn't that weapon be too powerful for Thanos to handle the blunt of it? You know, that was my thinking. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. How the fuck did Iron Man and Doctor Strange hold their own against him with 4 Infinity Stones? Which was badass. It was like, wow, this is how strong Iron Man and Doctor Strange are. They can fight this guy. Even Steve Rogers, like, holds the fucking hand and for a few seconds. But in this movie, they all just get thrown around and Thanos is, like, super powerful. It's like, oh, fuck, is he this strong? He didn't even need the Infinity Gauntlet. You know? I'm not saying that's a total flaw. I'm just asking if people could answer that question for me in the comments section or in the chat if you could explain to me the power levels. I'm not trying to be like, oh, I look how smart I am. Like, I'm genuinely curious how that works. Because I just figured that if Captain America's wielding Mjolnir and Thor has Stormbreaker and Iron Man's using all, I just figured they would be able to hold Thanos down more than they did, personally. I didn't, yeah, and I did not like them. I just didn't like it being a past Thanos. It made him less complex and less interesting. He didn't even know them. He even says to Scarlet Witch, I don't even know who you are. So that made it like, who cares if they beat this guy? He doesn't even care about them. He's just trying to save his ass. Like, it's not that compelling to watch them beat this guy, because he's kind of just a random villain now, this version of Thanos, instead of being you know, the Thanos that we grew to really know and fear in Infinity War. I didn't really find this guy that scary, because he's just kind of doing this without a motivation that's as interesting. It doesn't define the movie as much. I mean, I don't disagree that Thanos, you know, is strong and should be able to put up a fight. I don't disagree. It's just he was kicking their asses. I mean, it wasn't even a fight. He was going to kill all three of them easily. It was really very easy for him, it seemed like. I mean, like, he was just fucking them up. That was my issue. I just think it could have been a more tense battle where, you know, Thanos was getting fucked up a lot too. His arm, you know, like, he got hurt really bad, and Cap was hurt really bad, and they were both getting hurt, you know. Then there's a scene where Thanos brings all of his forces, and Captain America's gonna fight them all off like Jon Snow. And then probably the best moment in the finale is when all the Avengers will show up. When all the Avengers show up and Black Panther's there, Spider-Man, everyone, that's a great moment. The On Your Left, which is a reference to, they bring up a lot of lines of dialogue, just like Game of Thrones has been doing. That's a line from the beginning of Winter Soldier. So they have a big fight at the end, the Lord of the Rings fight, and it's mainly them jumping around with the Infinity Gauntlet, the Stark Gauntlet, trying to get it to somebody so they can win the battle. Because, you know, they already snapped everyone back. But Captain Marvel shows up, and she's so fucking strong that it's kind of like, well, shit, she should be able to beat Thanos. But they actually do something clever where he grabs an Infinity Stone and uses it against her, which I thought he was going to do in the final battle more. That he would use a stone and maybe another character would use a stone, and we would see a stone battle. See, that's what I would have done. I would have had Doctor Strange use the Time Stone. I would have had, like, Captain America use a stone, Thor uses a stone, and Thanos has a stone. Like, maybe he has the Reality Stone. So they're all doing different things against each other. He's changing reality, and then Doctor Strange is reversing time, and while he's doing that, they use the Soul Stone. So the whole thing is a stone battle, and we keep getting a change of reality and time shifts. So the battle keeps repeating itself, and characters may die, and then Doctor Strange rewinds the clock and brings them back. But then Thanos keeps changing the realities from, which I think would actually be awesome. I think that would be more epic than just a typical everybody runs at each other. Captain America finally says Avengers assemble, which was cool after all the build-up. I remember at the end of Age of Ultron, there's that part where he's like, Avengers, and then it just cuts to the credits. But somebody asked me, how would I change the movie? Well, I would have had more stuff happen with the Infinity Stones. I would have done more with the Time Stone. I would have done more with the Reality Stone. I would have done more with the Soul Stone. Just like those scenes in Infinity War where Thanos uses the stones. I think they had a missed opportunity here to actually do more with each one of them. Instead of it all came down to who can snap their fingers first. Which is really, it just became a game of baked potato and who could snap their fingers first. I don't know why Doctor Strange, he said because there was 14 million outcomes, so I guess in every outcome where he used the when he used the Time Stone, they lost. Possibly because Thanos was able to kill everybody off that was a main character, and then the Time Stone doesn't work. I don't know. That's because he says there's 14, so there's only one outcome. He even holds up his finger, one to Iron Man, to let him know this was the one outcome where they beat Thanos. So that's the logic of the movies. But it would have been nice to see the Time Stone used some more. I'll say that. That's one of the best parts of Doctor Strange, the movie, is the Time Stone, and we haven't got to see the Time Stone do dick for the last 2 movies. So that's just it for me. I would have liked to have seen more of the time travel, time heist stuff, more time committed to that. I would have liked less of the beginning of the movie, and I would have liked more Infinity Stones being used in the final battle, like when Thanos used one against Captain Marvel. I think you could have seen stones versus stones, and that could have been really cool. That would, yeah, she gets it by suicide. Aren't you supposed to sacrifice someone you love, but she just jumps off and dies, and he doesn't really sacrifice her? So how is that work? And it's the same shot when Gamora dies, like with her laying there. It's the exact same shot, which is like, what the fuck? I was thinking about Infinity War. New things were exciting, like them going there and meeting the Red Skull was exciting because you weren't expecting it. It was just the same thing here. You know, there was things like that. It's like, oh, well, none of this is very new. I've kind of seen all of this before. Where's the new shit? You know, or head nods to things. Even the elevator scene from Captain America Winter Soldier. It's like, well, yeah, I've seen this before. It's just this time they don't fight. Which, that's cute. But that's not as awesome as, you know, the fight scene in Winter Soldier. Well, that's the thing. I wonder too, Casper. I don't know. That was a question a lot of people asked in Infinity Wars. Why didn't he use the Time Stone? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, to be honest with you. A lot of questions are left open from these 2 movies. I would have either had them fight Thanos again, or when you kill Thanos off in the beginning, that's the last time Thanos is in the movie. And they don't see Thanos again. And it's just more about them completing this time travel mission, and it's it's against the clock movie. Like, they only have a certain amount of time to get all the Infinity Stones, and they barely do it. And then the end of the movie's like Back to the Future, like that scene where Hawkeye gets the text from his wife, and Ant-Man goes outside and sees the birds. I think that should have just been the end of the movie, probably. Was that they saved the day and brought everyone back, and everyone's happy for the most part. And maybe, you know, if you still want to kill Iron Man, he dies in the time travel thing, or, you know, if you still want to kill off main characters, you could have done it during the time travel stuff, or that they have to fight an enemy in the past and they're not able. You know, maybe they get caught up with a different villain. Maybe they end up in like Doctor Strange and they have to fight some of those characters. Actually, it would have been cool for them to go through the Doctor Strange finale, see the Avengers go through that scene. I also did not like the scene where they had all of the female characters together in one shot, although I did hear on the Mauler stream, and it would have been funny and it would have been brilliant when all the women, because the question, I don't have a problem with them putting all the females together, but why were they all standing in the same spot together like that? That was stupid. But if the camera would have panned over and Drax was standing there, because we didn't get any funny Drax scenes, we didn't get any funny Groot scenes. I was very disappointed we didn't get anything with these characters. We didn't even really get any good Star-Lord stuff till the very end with him and Chris, which that was great. And I can't wait to see Thor with him in Guardians 3. I think that's the best ending they came up with for the next movie. But I would have liked to have seen more with those characters again, because I thought they were so likable in Infinity War. It would have been nice to see Drax do some funny stuff, like show up in that shot. So there's a shot with all of the women defending Captain Marvel when she goes with the gauntlet that was fucking preachy and stupid, and condescending, really. How do you think that would have been if they went for an ending with the 2 versions of Thanos? You know, that could have been interesting, that the Thanos in the future changed his mind about what happened. And so he actually decides to help the Avengers change everything. Wouldn't this be interesting? Here's my pitch. They go to see Thanos, they cut his arm off, and they talk to him, and he realizes that nothing is better, because that's the decision he comes to at the end of this movie, is that people care too much and regret too much, so the only solution is to wipe out the entire universe and start a new one. one out of blood, as they say. So what if future Thanos at the beginning was with them and said, you know what, I've seen that my plan was actually bad and it didn't work. And then they come up with a time travel thing, and Thanos is like, I'm going to go with you guys to stop myself from doing this. And then Thanos has to fight and try to convince his past selves that he is wrong about his philosophy. Because that's something you wouldn't have expected. Thanos regrets what he did and actually changes his mind and realizes that it wasn't worth it, and then killing Gamora wasn't worth it. And his intention is to possibly see if he can bring Gamora back, but then he finds out he can't. Because the Soul Stone keeps it. And then maybe Thanos ends up becoming the hero at the end of the story. And the characters have to learn to forgive him for his actions. Stuff like that, maybe. That would have been... I wouldn't have expected that, like a team-up movie where Thanos is teamed up with Iron Man and them, especially after what he did to them. Although this was the first time they were actually the Avengers and they avenged something, which was what they were going for, and I like that. But I actually think future Thanos talking to past Thanos and telling him that we were wrong and it isn't what you think it is, but past Thanos won't listen to him. And then future Thanos actually has to kill himself, perhaps with the blade, the past blade, and stab himself with it. Kind of like how Nebula killed herself. And then Thanos uses the Infinity Gauntlet at the end, and he snaps his fingers, but when he snaps it, he makes all of past Thanos' army disappear and himself disappear. And Thanos is the one that kills himself in his own army, and it's not Iron Man sacrificing himself, saying, I am Iron Man, which is fan service. It's actually Thanos. It's going back to the snap from Infinity War, but this time he's snapping to kill his people, and it's not to bring everybody... It's not to kill half the universe of innocent people or what have you. It's to kill his own men. And his self-sacrifice to redeem himself and his actions, I think may have been more interesting. I don't know. I'm not saying I'm a better writer than the guys who wrote these movies. These guys are actually pretty good screenwriters. Exactly. He's the only one who can use the Infinity Gauntlet, is what they find out, because Hulk gets damaged and Thanos is like, no, I can use it. And he's hurt in the battle. You know, he got his arm cut off and he has to use his left hand now. Yeah, Iron Man was able to handle the gauntlet, yet Hulk had a hard time, and I don't know if that would have been lame. I don't know if that's more lame than them fighting past Thanos and him just kind of getting defeated. I don't know. That was so much more cliche than anything else. It was just like, that was the real problem. Was like, oh, we just have to beat this bad guy now and save the day. Which just made the stakes all kind of go away that was there in Infinity War, which I get. That's what this was, the wrap up to that movie, but you know, we really had to lose Iron Man over that. That was the thing. It didn't feel grand enough for me to really like get the emotions of Iron Man sacrificing himself. But how long have we been doing this? I feel like this has been going on pretty long. It's been decent length. So yeah, I didn't get how they were able to... The Thanos was so strong. I didn't like them fighting past Thanos. I don't mind Iron Man's ending and him dying and saying, I am Iron Man. That didn't bother me. I will say, I did not like Captain America's ending. You know, I really didn't like it. I like it in the surface level, and they did establish it in the movie. He still had the picture of Peggy Carter, and he talks about how you have to move on. But correct me if I am wrong. I am willing to be wrong about this. Let me make that very clear again. I'm not trying to say I'm objectively right about this movie. I don't know everything, and I don't remember everything. Am I the only one that took Captain America's arc, in particular in Winter Soldier, that he had accepted that the past was the past and that he had to live in the present and help set a better future? Wasn't that the story arc? I didn't think... Because this was like, yes, it was nice that he got to go back in time and live his life, and he gave the shield to Falcon, even though Falcon doesn't have superpowers, so how is he going to be Captain America? Is he going to be Captain America with guns and wings? And he gets to dance with Peggy at the end. He gets the dance that he never got to have at the end of Captain America. I get it. But to me, what made his character development was that in Winter Soldier, he had accepted, like at the beginning, he goes to see her die, and he goes to the museum, and Bucky's his past, and his past is literally coming back to haunt him, his friend Bucky. But then at the end of the movie, he accepts like it's a new world, and he has to think with nuance, and he can't be set in his ideals from the 1940s. And he's a new man. And he modernizes, and he wants to affect the world, and he knows he's necessary to be in this time, that it was fortunate that he was frozen because he can help the world. So then that affects the events in Civil War and what's happening in this world of superheroes, and then where he's at in Infinity War and even this movie. I don't know if I like the idea that he just goes back and stays in time as all the events unfold, and he's not involved with them. I felt like he had already accepted that Peggy married someone else, and it wasn't meant to be. It was almost like he cucked her husband with time travel. Like, that poor guy. You know, he's going on a date with her, and then Cap just shows up, and he's like, well, she's mine now, motherfucker. I don't know. I don't like it. I don't like that. I think Captain America, if you're not going to kill him off, he should stay in the movies and not be an old man. I don't mind Captain passing on the shield and retiring. And I don't mind him going off somewhere. Maybe he goes off to explore things and stuff like that to find himself. Or he goes to time travel and we don't really know what happens. Maybe it's a mystery. That would have been nice. Like, that could have set up the future. Instead, I get they're trying to give this closure to his storyline. But for me, that just wasn't consistent with the storyline that was in the other Russo brother Captain America movies. I don't think he wanted to go back to the past anymore. I think he learned to accept that he wouldn't, and that he didn't want to, in a way. Or at least I thought so. Maybe, but like I said, maybe I read it wrong. Maybe that wasn't the storyline. Maybe that wasn't his character arc over all these movies. I don't know. That just didn't feel organic to me. That felt like very forced. Like Thor ending up with the Guardians and leaving Asgard, not being a leader, that felt organic. Iron Man even, like, dying after all these years and all that didn't feel out of place. You know, Hawkeye's storyline, Ant-Man, all the other characters' storylines feel pretty natural, but Captain America's, I think they thought that it would get a great audience reaction because it makes them happy to see him happy after all he's went through. But I don't think that's who he was anymore, I guess. I didn't see Steve Rogers as that way anymore. I didn't think the man out of time was stuck in the past. But this movie's all about going back to the past and dealing with it. And the characters have to deal with their past and their mistakes and their regrets. And then hopefully they can fix it this time. They can make up for the mistakes they've made. But I don't really think Steve Rogers getting frozen was a mistake. That needed to be corrected. I think it was necessary. I don't know. That was my feeling on it. I didn't like it. I think that's because Cap has accepted his life in the present, learned to move on in the inside, that he earned the choice of what feels is best for him. Cap's story was fine. I didn't really care, but Cap's always been boring to me. I really like Captain America in the last several movies. And I just didn't like him. The footage of Peggy talking about her husband could have been a cover-up for him time traveling. Well, if that's what it is, that's cool. I don't have a problem with that totally. It's kind of like Superman ending up with Lois at the end of Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow by Alan Moore. Yeah, I don't like Cap and being old. I just don't. I saw it coming too that they were going to do that. I just didn't like the time travel rules either. And I thought they broke their own rules. And it created plot holes. Like, also, as Peter Parker, he goes back to school at the end. It's been 5 years, so are all the characters, did all of his classmates disappear? Because in the sequel, Far From Home, are we going to see the same kids that were his friends in the first movie? Because all of them couldn't have disappeared, right? Like, there has to be half of them are still alive. So they would have already graduated high school, and Peter's still, like, 15, 16? So that should be interesting in the next Spider-Man movie is, how did the time jump affect Peter? Because did Aunt May disappear? So is she 5 years older? because we see her at the end of this movie. We see Marissa Tomei looking all hot, and we're like, well, is she older now? You know, because all this stuff happened, like earthquakes and all these things, and that stuff didn't change. Like, they didn't fix that. They just brought everybody back. So how is the world and the universe going to be now after the snap lasted for 5 years? Everybody, like, you're going to go back to see your wife or your husband, and they could be with somebody else, you know, or, you know, they moved on. How does that affect you? Like, is Hawkeye going to be able to... Is he going to be okay with what he did as Ronin? I'm not exactly sure. Those are the questions that are left open, which I wish would have been explored more. Yeah, it's a thing. I don't think you can go back to normal, right? Like, everything's going to be affected now from now on. They can't fix everything. They could only bring people back, but the world's still affected by 5 years of half the population being missing. And everyone still felt that pain for 5 years. So, you know, I also would have liked to see Nick Fury talk. It was nice to see him in a shot. It was great to see Jon Favreau get a scene, and he talks, and he started all of this. I thought that was very appropriate, and it was a very nice tribute to Jon Favreau, and how his career kind of blew up in the same way the Marvel Universe did, and he's tied to it, and he's part of this history. All of that was great. Robert Downey Jr. is great in this. Cap fighting Thanos, the Mjolnir stuff's great. The time travel stuff, for the most part, is a lot of fun. There are very nice, dramatic, emotional scenes. There are some funny bits. The Hulk's really good in this movie. The final fight, for the most part, is pretty satisfying. The very last scene of the movie is sweet. Like I said, there's really good scenes, and then scenes that are just kind of okay, and then overall there's a lot of stuff that totally doesn't make sense or doesn't feel consistent. But there's a lot of other stuff that's really cool. Like, you know, like Bruce Banner getting knocked out of the Smart Hulk in the Ancient One sequence and him talking to her. That's fun. All the stuff with Loki and the stuff from the first Avengers, that's fun. Nebula's storyline is interesting, and a lot's going on there. Thanos scenes are still really fun in this. Gamora coming back is a really interesting thing, and her changing to be good like she was before is really interesting. All of that stuff I liked a lot. I like Ant-Man coming back into the movie and kind of being the guy that kicks it off. But even the Giant Man part of the end part felt like, hey, remember this in Civil War? Wasn't it nice to see this again? Really should have Thanos or someone just restored the entire universe. That's what the comics did, because it was too weird otherwise. Yeah, I guess don't think about it. Time travel in movies will always make you scratch your head. No movie's ever been able to figure it out. So I'm not acting like this isn't a flaw with every time travel movie. It is. Time travel just doesn't work in stories very well. It's a great way to set up ideas, existential ideas, and to explore themes and stuff like that. But when you really try to get into the nitty-gritty and the science of it, you're just kind of like, oh, wait, this doesn't really make any sense. This would create the paradoxes and all that would just... You know, because you even think about it in this movie, you're like, wait a minute. Yeah, but I don't know. I just would have liked that to be a little bit better explained. Like, is this next Spider-Man movie going to be about him trying to adjust to it? Like, it was random. It didn't feel random, because isn't it pretty fucking coincidental that when Thanos snapped away half the population, all of the new Avengers disappeared except for Rocket, I think, and who else? Wasn't that it? That the original, that somehow Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Scarlet Witch, Hawkeye, all the original Avengers, the Hulk, all survived the snap? That sure didn't seem random to me. The screenwriter sure did get convenient when it came to the snap, that they made sure the original lineup stayed, but for the most part, everyone else disappeared. So it seems like it's to the convenience of the writers to how the half the population disappeared. So yeah, it didn't feel random, I gotta say. Because if it had truly been random, then like Thor would have disappeared, or Captain America, and someone like Black Panther would have stayed, or Peter Parker, or Doctor Strange, or someone like that. But the fact that everyone who stayed was the character they needed to tell this specific story didn't make it feel random. You know? Well, I know, it's just that that's what they were going for. If they were going for the sense of randomness, it didn't come across. It felt like it was very set in stone. No pun intended. But it didn't feel like it was as random if that's what they were going for. Quite frankly, at all. It didn't feel random at all. It felt very much like, well, we have to get rid of all these characters so we can say goodbye to the old characters, except for Nebula, Michonne, and a few other people. Yeah, Strange made the deal for Stark's life for Thanos not to kill him there, but that doesn't mean Doctor Strange necessarily has to disappear with the snap, or Peter Quill, or Drax, or Mantis, or Groot, you know, or T'Challa, or Falcon. That didn't feel as random to me. I mean, it was effective, but I feel like the randomness, it would have been more like, oh shit, like Captain America just disappeared, or like, oh shit, Black Widow, or, you know. For me, you know, I actually don't think they had to kill Peter Parker for the emotional reasons. I think like one of the best scenes is when he's all like, I lost the kid, you know, that, but and it motivates Tony. But it would have been nice to have I guess Ant-Man's their excuse for that, you know, that Ant-Man survived and was in the quantum realm and all that. I guess their thing is like, well, hey, Ant-Man's in this movie and he wasn't in the previous one, so I guess that's just how they decided to split up the movies. And I really liked Ant-Man in this movie. I actually wish he had more to do and been in the movie more. When shit started happening, Ant-Man was really fun. I really like Paul Rudd's like wow, like I'm so excited, yeah. Like performance. It's like a charming Jimmy Fallon if Jimmy Fallon was actually charming. Yeah, I know. Everyone who disappeared had an upcoming movie. I know. So I guess that means Scarlet Witch and Captain Marvel are the strongest Avengers. And that's about it. There isn't much else to say, unless I'm missing something that I didn't talk about. Some funny moments, but not one of the funnier Marvel movies. And some nice action at the end. I think there could have been more action. I think it was disappointing action. The choreography and some of it I think could have been better. In the early parts, there was a lot of quick cutting during the Cap versus Cap fight. It just overall, I don't think it was visually as interesting as Infinity War. I don't think the colors and the planets and all that were as interesting. I thought this was a little bit more generic in its visuals. This felt like it was a mix of Joss Whedon and Peter Jackson and some Robert Zemeckis, and that's kind of what they were going for. Where Infinity War to me felt like this is the natural continuation of what the Russo brothers have been developing. This made me almost wonder, like, should James Gunn have directed this? Should Jon Favreau have directed this? Should this have been made by a different filmmaker and gone back to its roots a little bit? Could we have gotten a different perspective? Some different writers being involved. Maybe Joss Whedon or James Gunn should have had more of an input on the screenplay. There's things like that I wonder about. I don't totally blame the Russos. I think this was just a very difficult movie to make. And I think they had a deadline, and I don't think they had as much time as they needed to flesh everything out. I think this needed some more time. Yeah, I do think people are making excuses a little bit, and I think people are kind of like giving this movie a pass because they love the characters and stuff so much that they're kind of they're being too positive and kind of ignoring that the movie's really got a lot of glaring issues and questions that aren't really fleshed out that could have been handled with lines of dialogue, you know. It is similar to Ready Player One, I won't say, but in the same way that I enjoyed Ready Player One and thought it was a fun, 2-hour chase movie, I thought this was a fun 3-hour let's get the stones and save everybody movie. Like, I still think this was a fun, dumb movie. Like, this was a fun, dumb, stupid, big old bag of popcorn blockbuster. In that sense, it worked. I think this was like a better version of Age of Ultron. But I think in the same way that Age of Ultron was a step down from the first Avengers, I think this was a step down from Infinity War. But having said all that, I still think, the fact that this wasn't a total train wreck is impressive, but you expect better from everyone involved with this. You think they could have done better. And yeah, I guess I just have to look as Infinity War is that epic action movie with all the characters I wanted. And this is just the quiet, for the most part, goodbye to the characters as we set up the next Marvel. And I have to look as Infinity War as like the real finale that had all the action and payoffs and comedy and excitement and thrills that I wanted. That's the movie. So Infinity War is still one of my favorite Marvel movies. It's like top 3 for me. And this is probably, somewhere outside of the top 10 or in the top 10. Like maybe it's number 10. But I would still recommend it. I still think, you have to see it if you've been invested. And, it's really a good idea for a movie. I like the idea of the time heist. And I really like a lot of things that could have happened in this movie, but it just feels like they didn't pull a lot of it off. And they made decisions that they thought would be exciting and new. And they would subvert what you were expecting, but I think they didn't all pay off as well as maybe they thought they did. And there was some wheel spinning going on because of it. It felt like the movie really didn't have purpose and momentum and knew where it was totally going. Yeah, I'm confused about the sacrifice thing too. I don't disagree. That doesn't totally make sense to me either. And I'm willing to hear an answer. Once again, I'm not challenging people like, this is fucking stupid. Like, if people have explanations, I'm open-minded. I'm open to hearing them. Like, maybe I didn't get it. Maybe I missed something. I'm open to missing something. I just, thinking about it, I'm like, well, that doesn't totally make sense. I kind of don't want to watch it again. So, like, Infinity War is a movie, like, I think has a lot of rewatchability, and I'd watch it like a dozen times. Where this movie, I still watch scenes on YouTube from Infinity War, clips from it and stuff. But this movie, I don't have that same, willingness to go back and watch it over and over again. It was kind of like, all right, I saw it. I saw the ending. That's it. I'm done. I can move on now for Marvel. But yeah, this movie, yeah, it seems like after this opening weekend, it's going to beat Avatar and make $3 billion. Because with the that opening week, it's $100 million more than fucking Infinity. That's insane. That means a lot of, in my theater, it was playing on 8 screens and each one of them were sold out. And in every theater in town, it was playing on several screens and it was sold out. IMAX, 3D, what have you. And so this film is just like a huge movie. But I think in the same way people, overly praise a lot of the future Game of Thrones episodes and their big battles and all that and the spectacle and ignore the horrible writing, or even Last Jedi defenders. I think some people are going to defend this movie, even though this is a well-acted movie, and has a lot of respect for its characters, more so than a lot of the other films and things I've talked about. I still think this is going to be kind of looked back on as that film that people are going to argue about. I think this is going to be the most debated Marvel movie. Age of Ultron had a debate for a while, but it's like most people came around to thinking it was mediocre. I think of this movie, some people are going to always defend this movie as a masterpiece, and other people are going to say, and you're going to be too harsh and say it's a piece of shit. But I don't think there's a lot of great scenes in this movie. I agree with you on that. I think there's just a lot of fun, okay scenes. I don't think there's as many iconic moments in this movie as other Marvel movies, and I don't think there's stuff that's that's as memorable. It was kind of just like a mix of a bunch of things we've seen before. I didn't come out of this thinking like, man, that was one of my favorite scenes in a superhero movie. I don't think there was any scene like that that I could think of that's like one of my favorite moments in a superhero film. I didn't have that. And I kept thinking about Days of Future Past and how much more I was into that, what was happening in that movie, and how much tighter it was, and how much, it just felt... It felt like Wolverine really didn't have time and he was trying to save the world. In this film, it didn't feel like... It felt like they could take as long as they wanted. Like, it didn't feel like they had to do it right away. It felt like they could pretty much fuck off if they wanted to and get the Infinity Stones. There was nothing holding them back from accomplishing their mission. So I was just waiting for them to fuck up. And it was like, they kind of fuck up when Iron Man messes up. And gets hit by the Hulk with the door and all that, but I don't think that was as like detrimental or as dramatic as it could have been. I thought there could have been more to create tension. That's a problem. I'm kind of scared this film peaked early. Because when I think back on it, my favorite scene is when Tony Stark comes back and is skinny, and just tell Robert Downey Jr. is really acting there, and tells them like, man, I lost the kid. And then when he yells at them at the table and he takes off his core reactor and he gives it to Cap, and I think that scene's amazing. I think that scene where he's in there with them, and I think that's some of Downey Jr. I mean, it's great to see Downey Jr. actually acting again. And I hope now that he's done with this fucking role, he can actually work with David Fincher again on a movie. He could work with other actually get good roles. I would love to see Robert Downey Jr. be in good shit. I'd like him to not play Tony Stark anymore. I'd like to see more Zodiacs and Kiss Kiss Bang Bangs and go back to that guy. And hopefully he works with, works with Martin Scorsese on a movie, works with, Paul Thomas Anderson or something. I would like to see him work with other filmmakers and do different roles because I love him. I'm a fan. But he's great in those early scenes. And those early scenes do have a nice tone. And when they even go to see Thanos, it's still exciting. You still feel the excitement from Infinity War. But then once the movie sets itself up again, it's not the same. I don't know, it's too somber. So then when the movie tries to become exciting, it's like it doesn't totally work because they didn't build the energy up enough early on. Yeah, I agree. He probably deserves a pity Oscar nom. Because he probably, if we're being fair, deserved an Oscar nom for the first Iron Man. That's a truly great performance. And you even see his audition for that movie, and he's great. Even the scenes where he puts the helmet on. That scene where that he wants to go fight the terrorists. There's a shot where Downey Jr.'s putting on the helmet, and his facial expression is so fucking serious and intense. He's really great in that movie. At least a Golden Globe nomination. So they might give him some kind of pity nomination, but he is good in this movie. Like, I would say this is like top 3 Downey. Like, I would say it's the first Iron Man, then probably Civil War and this movie are his best performances. But as far as a comedic performance, I thought he was killing it in Infinity War. It was how much fun he was having was so entertaining in that movie. In this movie, Iron Man's a lot more serious than I was expecting. A lot less jokey, which made sense, but it also kind of did take away because Tony Stark is a lot of the humor. So we were getting, and it's kind of like they were leaning on Thor and Cap for the humor, and it didn't work as well. Something about the somber scenes were let down until the time ice picks up. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know, Dead Scold. I agree with you. There was a lot of outcomes they could have had that didn't involve Tony Stark dying. It's like he just wanted to sacrifice himself as like a fuck you to Thanos. I think it would have been nice if he'd given him the middle finger instead of doing the snap, but... Yeah, Chris Hemsworth was funny. I just don't think the writing was that funny. Because, like, it's weird. At the end of the movie, as soon as Star-Lord shows up and he has that scene with Thor at the end, that's, like, one of the funniest scenes in the movie. And it's like, yeah, this Chris Pratt really did bring a lot to Infinity War. Tom Holland as Peter Parker brought a lot to Infinity... Doctor Strange brought a lot to Infinity War. As a character, Benedict Cumberbatch playing off Robert Downey Jr., that brought a lot to that movie. There was real stuff going on there, and I didn't. It's almost like the original cast didn't have the chemistry that I was hoping for them to have. They felt a little disconnected. Like Captain America and Iron Man's friendship didn't feel as great as I thought it would, and their relationship with Thor, it felt too disconnected. Where those new relationships were just a little bit more interesting to me. Yeah, if you throw another moon at me, I'm gonna lose it. That stuff was great. There was no moment like this in this movie where I laugh or there's just like Thanos throwing a fucking moon at Iron Man. That's so badass. There was no awesome moment like that where it was just like, that's so fucking cool, yeah, Pratt and Hemsworth too. That was like, man, I want this movie. I want them to play off each other. Fuck what I just watched. All this really did was just make me want Guardians of the Galaxy 3. That's really all this did. Was like, well, that looks like that's going to be great. The two Chris's together, James Gunn's back. That should be a fun movie. Really, that should be one of the better Marvel movies. Also, I'm curious what they're going to do with the Hulk. I hope that Hulk has a scene with, like, Peter Parker. I hope he's in the new Spider-Man movies as kind of like the new Tony Stark. I would like to see Ant-Man and Hulk together, possibly. I think that would help the two of those characters. Their standalone movies have failed to be to a certain level, so I'd like to see them together. Hawkeye, I think they should just not use anymore. Even though they've talked about a TV series. And Captain Marvel's just easily the most generic Marvel character, like, by far. It's crazy. I mean, War Machine's more interesting than her. Is more interesting than her. Well, thank you for listening. I appreciate you coming in and listening. Yeah, I wanted to love this movie, guys. Let me make that clear. I did not go in wanting to dislike this or be disappointed. I thought this was going to be a great movie. I had nothing but faith in the Russo brothers. I thought they were gonna bring it home again, like they have many times before. I thought this was gonna be like, maybe not a classic, an instant classic, but I thought it would be like a solid, 8.5 out of 10, and I would love it, and it would kick off the summer movie season and where we were going, kick our ass, and take me to a new place as a Marvel fan, and show me things visually and thematically that I've never seen in a comic book movie. And I thought Thanos' storyline was going to get wrapped up in a very interesting way. But all of that being said, it kind of just, it was kind of just a fun time at the movies. It was just another fun little Marvel movie. But it felt like how good the movies had been in the recent phases. Like, I really like Spider-Man Homecoming. I like Thor Ragnarok. I like Infinity War. I was liking where things were going. I didn't like Black Panther and other stuff, but this was as insulting a Black Panther, but in a lot of ways it was like as disappointing as Black Panther with all the hype and everything, that it just didn't meet it. I think Star-Lord surviving would have really helped this movie. I gotta say, I agree with you. Because Paul Rudd came in as the comedy all-shucks guy, but I really think Chris Pratt, if he had been time-traveling with them... Chris Pratt just has so much goddamn charisma, and he's basically playing Andy Dwyer in these movies. And it's so likable, and I really think Chris Pratt with them, or Scarlet Witch, I agree with you. I think they needed another character like that, a newer character. Because this is the finale to the original Avengers lineup. It unfortunately had a lot of the bad habits that were carried over from the original Avengers movie. That Infinity War kind of brought the sense of awe back with all of these new meetings. This one kind of took me backwards to where we were at, like, years ago. And it didn't feel like we were moving forward and this universe was getting bigger. Infinity War made everything feel like it was getting bigger. And this made it feel small again. For me. And that sort of bothered me that things got smaller again. Just a disappointment and a weird movie. A weird movie. Very weird decisions. Very weird tone. Very weird film visually even. It's a very odd film. And that's how I felt about that Game of Thrones episode. You marvel at some of the craftsmanship, but then you're also sort of confused by some of the writing decisions. It wasn't the Return of the King, it's the Return of the Jedi. There was a little bit of Ewok to this movie, unfortunately. I guess my final rating, I don't want to shit on this, because I've basically been shitting on it for 90 minutes. I'm going to give this, I gave Infinity War an 8, and really in retrospect, I even think it might be an 8.5, because I kind of love it. Just as an action movie, I think it's the best action movie in the MCU. I'd probably give this like a 7. I really think it's more of a 6 as a movie. I think it has too many problems, and it's sort of generic, but just because of it being the finale, and how important it felt, and how big it is, and how much money it's making, and being part of that, and just the time travel part of it, the time heist, that stuff, wasn't entertaining enough, even a family film sort of during that part, that it was enough for me to give this like a 6.5 or a 7. Where I think if you watch that like hour of the movie, you'll have a fun time, and kids could even watch it. And then the last 40 minutes, you kind of get you get a big fight scene if you wanted the action. And there's some good dramatic scenes in the beginning, and that all kind of holds the movie together from being a bad movie. So I'm probably gonna go like 6.5 on this one, and you know, I don't think it was bad. It was a mediocre movie with great actors and great characters in it that carry it to being a movie that's interesting to watch because of everything that's come before. But as a film on its own, it's kind of like a 6.5. It's a very flawed, messy movie. But still, you know, very watchable, entertaining movie all the way. I wasn't bored. I wasn't bored during most of this movie. I was bored for like probably 10% of it. But I'd say 90% of this movie, I was having a good time. And that, you know, that's fine. Sometimes that's just what it is. And maybe that's the way. Maybe the Russos had to put this down to a level of almost mediocrity to say goodbye to these characters. Because, you know, after an Infinity War, you're like, well, shit, I just want 100 of these. But after this movie, you're like, okay, I guess I could say goodbye to some of these things, and maybe I'm just more interested in what's going on with the Guardians, and maybe we don't need any more Avengers movies. Maybe it's time to just have standalone team-up movies with 2 or 3 characters teaming up together. Maybe we don't need these movies anymore. Maybe it's time to move on to a different kind of Marvel movie. Maybe now we could see Spider-Man fight Dr. Octopus again, or the Green Goblin again, and get new versions of those characters. Maybe we could finally bring stuff like the Lizard back, or Venom, and do it all right this time. Maybe, you know, now we can have new Guardian stuff with Thor. Now we can maybe, you know, Falcon and War Machine could do some stuff together. Maybe that would be fun, like new Captain America, new Iron Man, you know, the sidekicks. They go on an adventure. You know, all of that. Maybe that'll all be fun. The Hulk in a Spider-Man movie. The Hulk helps Spider-Man fight Dr. Octopus or something. I could get into all that. I think that could be fun. But yeah, you know, 6.5. You know, it's not The Last Jedi, because I think the filmmakers had the best intentions, and I don't think Rian Johnson did. I think these filmmakers did. I think just something happened along the way, and this is the result, unfortunately. But hey, they made Infinity War, and I think it's great, so I can give them a pass on this one. Because I liked Infinity War so much. So, yeah, that's it. That's all I got to say. Thank you for watching. And please rewind your VHS tapes for your Bring Back the Store. And I'll see you tomorrow for Box Office Addict 78, where we'll be talking about the opening weekend for this movie and how it happened. And how much money it's going to end up making, and what it says about the future of people going to the movies, because there was an idea that movies were dying and people weren't going to the theater, but with an opening weekend like this, that's the opposite. It's clear that people are really showing up now to watch stuff if it's done in a correct way, if it's established in the right way. People want to go to the movies. It's not dead yet. And I got to give a lot of credit to Kevin Feige and everyone who's worked on this, the teamwork involved with all the cast, all the producers, all the directors and writers, to make that kind of money. The film itself is a mixed bag, but the results, the financial success, the tapping into the zeitgeist, how important this film is to so many people, is a testament to something, to the hard work that went into this and how it translated, and seeing how so many other franchises failed. You have to give Marvel credit, even if the movie didn't work for you, that they pulled this off, that they pulled off this kind of mammoth success, with the support of Disney and its marketing machine, but also just from, you know, establishing something that people wanted to go on that journey, and they were able to keep that audience so long, for a decade, to build up to this and make that kind of money. That's pretty crazy. And it's sort of overwhelming and sort of hard to process all at once. So for that, you know, this is a fascinating movie. I just wish the movie was as fascinating and epic as all of the hype and success that's around it. But yeah, that's it, guys. Thanks.